Is workers' compensation taxable? Well, as with most accounting questions or tax questions, the answer is it depends. Workers' compensation benefits cover you if you've suffered a work-related injury or an occupational sickness. You might wonder if you have to report those benefits on your tax return and pay taxes on any settlement or award you receive as part of that injury or occupational illness. And the answer is it depends on the specifics of your case. But in general, a workers' compensation settlement is not considered taxable income and is almost always free of federal taxes. However, there's some exceptions to the rule, so it's essential to speak with an experienced workers' comp attorney to get the specific facts of your situation. A workers' comp attorney routinely handles workers' compensation cases and will be familiar with not only federal law, but the relevant state laws, because workers' compensation is a state law, is run by the state, and can provide you with legal advice on what the best course of action is for your case. I am not a workers' compensation attorney, so the information I'm giving you here is more general information, and I'd encourage you to go talk to a workers' comp attorney if you've got a larger settlement or you think that you've got a significant claim. So what is a workers' compensation settlement? Well, workers' compensation settlements are agreements to pay an injured employee in exchange for waiving the right to sue the employer with a personal injury claim on a work-related injury. All states passed some version of a Workers' Compensation Act back over 100 years ago to reduce the amount of litigation and ensure that employees would be covered by insurance, and that the ability of the employee to get covered wasn't solely dependent on the employer's financial position. So the employer can't just file bankruptcy and you don't get to recover for your injury. The process begins with the filing of a workers' compensation claim through your employer or the medical provider. You get hurt at work, the first thing you need to do, is go to the emergency room, let them know that you were injured at work, and they can file a claim. Or your employer should be contacting workers' compensation and say that they've got an injury on the job, and that will trigger the workers' compensation claim. In most cases, the insurance pays the medical bills and lost wages, and you quickly return to work. Workers' comp payments are based on the severity of the injury, the length of time you're out, and whether you suffer a temporary or permanent disability. However, most of the time, while there's a relatively short period that you're out and you might get some workers' comp for a few weeks or so until you recover, there may be a lump sum settlement in a severe injury or extended loss of time absence. And these types of workers' compensation settlements are typically offered when a severe injury or death or disability has resulted from the workplace incident. In some cases, the amount of the workers' comp settlement will be agreed to by both parties, but when that's not the case, it may be determined through a court process. And again, if you've got a large injury or a loved one suffered a death at work, you should be in contact with a workers' compensation attorney. A well-crafted workers' compensation settlement will ensure that both parties, the employer and the employee, feel that justice and fairness have been served appropriately. A workers' comp settlement ultimately incentivizes businesses to maintain safe work environments and to protect their employees from undue harm. Getting a workers' comp settlement can be a real challenge, but following the proper steps could help you obtain a very favorable outcome. Step one is contacting your employer, informing them of your injury if you were injured. Or if you were injured and you can't contact your employer because you're already at an urgent care facility, you need to let them know that you were injured on the job. Your employer has a legal obligation to offer you assistance. From there, you still should file a claim with your employer's insurance company and provide them with as much information as possible about your situation. In some states, like Washington State, the state administers workers' compensation. You'll be filing with the Department of Labor and Industries there. The workers' compensation claim will be assigned to a specialist, and they're going to get all of your medical records and other documents and assess all that evidence to help you reach an acceptable settlement agreement with both parties. With some patience and determination, that process can help deliver deserving workers their rightful due compensation. And it's a valuable resource. Both workers' compensation insurance and a good workers' comp attorney is a valuable resource when dealing with financial hardship caused by unexpected injuries in the workplace or the death of a loved one in the workplace. A workers' comp settlement is one of the best outcomes for an injured worker. The settlement provides financial relief since it covers past and future medical costs, lost wages, payment of attorney's fees, and a long-term disability payment if the injury is permanent. Just as importantly, a workers' comp settlement also promotes closure and allows the injured worker to move forward with their life after a traumatic event and allows the employer to move on by hiring a replacement worker. Rather than worrying about the uncertainty of litigation, a settlement allows everyone involved to come to agreement that all the parties are going to be equally happy or unhappy with. This gives the employee peace of mind knowing that their suffering has been addressed and they can move on from their experience toward brighter days. Every workers' comp settlement is unique, and it may include lump sum payments, long-term payments to cover the loss of income, or both. The amount of money you can expect to receive depends on various factors, including the severity and type of injury, the legal fees associated with filing a claim, and any applicable state or federal workers' compensation laws. To get accurate estimation of what you could expect from a settlement, it's best to consult with an attorney specializing in employment law as soon as possible. Find somebody that you can trust, and I'll have other videos up here on how to find the right attorney and how to find the right accountant for your situation. But this is one that you should look for a workers' compensation specialist. They can explain possible settlement amounts for injuries similar to yours and help you acquire more detailed information about the insurance company's policies and procedures or the state law that applies. Don't be afraid to ask questions during this process. You have rights, and you should pursue those rights if your injury resulted from negligence from an employer or other parties. When a worker is injured on the job, they may be entitled to receive settlement in the form of workers' compensation. It's always important to consider potential tax implications that may stem from the settlement, as it could affect how much money you receive from the total amount. Depending on your particular situation, different taxes may apply. Generally, these settlements are not considered taxable wages and income. Still, if any interest income accrued during the payment, during the period that you were waiting for the payment to be made, that may be subject to taxes just like any other type of interest income. Additionally, because a workers' comp settlement constitutes physical injury-related payouts, payments associated with medical travel or expenses related to medical rehabilitation may also be exempt from taxation. Speaking with a qualified tax advisor who's familiar with both your state and federal tax law as it pertains to settlements and workers' compensation for further information about applicable taxes for your specific work comp settlement is essential. It's part of the structuring of that settlement, can be significantly different to give you some tax advantages. Now, how is a workers' compensation claim settled? And how is it taxed? A workers' comp settlement is usually taxed according to the principle of origin, which is a fancy accounting way of saying that income generated from work-related activities or injuries must be taxed in the same way as earned income. If you have worked during the same period under which you were injured, your settlement amount will be taxed as ordinary income, similar to wages and salaries. On the other hand, those who have been out of work due to an injury for some time with no wages paid are likely to get a tax benefit or exclusion on their settlement amount. Sometimes when they're structuring these settlements, they'll have you working in a job that provides accommodation for your injury. You'll receive additional compensation on top of that to account for the difference between what that job pays. Let's say it's a desk job and your regular construction job. And that could create taxable liability for you on all those wages because you're working. As opposed to if you're out of work completely, it may be tax-free. So you're going to want to understand all those nuances. The issue with the disability insurance payment really depends on whether disability insurance was included in the settlement, because it can alter your tax rates and it could alter your allowances. As a result, it's always best to consult a tax professional regarding your situation before you complete the workers' comp settlement agreement. And workers' compensation attorneys will know this. They will either know how to structure these things, or they're going to have accountants that they work with to help structure this for you. However, you should have, or likely do have, a personal tax preparer or personal tax professional who should be involved in that process as well. Receiving a work comp settlement as a lump sum payment can relieve anyone whose livelihood has been impacted by an accident or injury sustained on a job. However, many people mistakenly believe the money you receive from workers' compensation is taxable by the IRS. This false belief can cause a bunch of financial stress associated with the settlement that you don't need to worry about. In 99% of the time, a workers' comp settlement, lump sum settlement, is not IRS taxable. The IRS has set itself apart from other government assistance programs by ensuring that the money received from workers' compensation will not be taxed. Ultimately, you will receive all of your hard-earned benefits free of worry, free of federal taxation. Depending on your resident state, however, you may be required to pay taxes on any settlement money you receive. The amount varies from state to state and will depend on the size of the settlement. For the settlement to be considered taxable income, it must exceed certain thresholds set by each state if your state has income tax. Before accepting any money from a lawsuit settlement or workers' comp settlement, it's essential to consult with your lawyer and your financial advisor / tax professional regarding how any potential tax rate would affect what you'll take home. Remember, if you live in a tax-free state or have a special exemption, you don't have to worry about paying taxes. So for me, living in Florida or Washington State, I never had to worry about paying state taxes. It's great to hear that the money you receive due to a settlement does not get lumped into your income for tax purposes. You can use it without worrying about whether you have enough to pay off your debt or make a big purchase, since it will push you in any higher tax brackets than you were in before. This means you can use the entirety of the funds with no questions, and it's extra money in your pocket that you don't need to declare on your taxes. What's more and more governments are cracking down on people, on how people are filing their taxes or failing to file their taxes. So that's kind of an important thing to know. Don't worry about that from a federal tax perspective. If you've been involved in a settlement and use the money to pay for medical expenses, such as doctor or hospital stays, those expenses may actually be deductible off your taxes if you itemize. So when you're filing your annual taxes, if you fill out a Schedule A, itemized deductions, you can include your medical bills that you paid with the non-taxable settlement. You may actually end up getting money back off your regular wages because you had enough medical expenses that you had to pay out of pocket from that non-taxed settlement. So again, deducting those costs from your income may dramatically reduce the amount of money you owe in taxes and can alleviate some of the financial stress associated with the medical bills. Again, a good CPA, a good tax professional will be able to help you through that calculus and figure out how to do that and whether you qualify. I want to take a minute to just talk a little bit about workers' compensation and Social Security disability insurance. When it comes to getting the benefits you need after an injury, you might wonder what your options are. You have options at both the state and federal levels. If you're unable to work, you might consider applying for Social Security benefits, such as Supplemental Security Income, SSI, or Social Security Disability Income, SSDI. There's different requirements depending on each one, which one you might qualify for, if you qualify for them at all. However, if you are permanently disabled and unable to work, you may qualify for one or both of those Social Security programs. You may also be eligible for workers' compensation. So Social Security is at the federal level, and workers' compensation is going to be at your state. What is SSDI and how does it differ from workers' comp? Because you might be going, hey, okay, benefits. Want to know what benefits I've got. Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, is a program administered by the United States government, the Social Security Administration, that provides cash benefits to individuals unable to work due to a long-term disability or illness. SSDI differs dramatically from workers' compensation in a number of ways. Well, workers' compensation is only administered to those who become injured while performing their job duties. SSDI provides eligibility to anyone with a recognized medical condition that prevents them from working, regardless of how they obtained their disability. Additionally, while workers' compensation only covers injuries or illnesses related directly to one's job, SSDI covers a much broader range of illnesses and disabilities and isn't limited to just work-related conditions. Furthermore, SSDI payments are determined primarily on the individual's financial status and income level, rather than being attributed to the severity of the disability, which can differ significantly between workers' compensation claims and SSDI claims. If in doubt, apply for both. The worst you can get is a declination on SSDI. So how do you apply for SSDI benefits? Well, Applying for Social Security benefits can be complex and arduous, but it's not impossible. The first step in the application process is to fill out an online or mailed SSDI application. You can go out to ssa.gov and you can find the applications there. Completing that form requires detailed information about your medical condition and employment history. Additionally, you might need to gather additional medical information or proof of income that verifies your disability status. Once you have gathered all that required information, submit them directly to the Social Security Administration. Depending on the complexity of your condition, it may take anywhere from several months to over a year for the SSA, Social Security Administration, to decide the outcome of your application. During that time, you must reach out and stay in touch with your SSA claims administrator if you have questions or concerns in the process. Although applying for SSDI can be intimidating, it can be painful, it could be absolutely a slog. Arm yourself with that knowledge and persist through the process to get positive results. Again, a good attorney who specializes in workers' comp likely also has the ability to help you through the SSDI application process. There's advantages to having both workers' comp and SSDI. Both workers' comp and SSDI can make all the difference when you can't work due to an injury or illness. Workers' comp covers medical expenses and lost wages to replace workplace injuries, while SSDI provides income replacement for those with disabilities from illnesses, injuries, or other impairments, regardless of when they were incurred. This combination of benefits helps employees who can no longer work stay financially afloat while recuperating. Workers' comp and SSDI provide desperately needed money, often giving people a chance to get back on their feet sooner rather than later. These two support systems can help you cope with unforeseen financial hardships resulting from disability due to illness or injury. However, workers' comp and SSDI can cause financial strain on you as you may receive payments from each source that overlap. The overlap creates an issue where the person receiving the payments can only use a portion of their benefits and have to pay back either workers' compensation as an offset and access only one benefit at a time. People eligible for SSDI might find it challenging to work and therefore maintain their eligibility for benefits due to restrictions based on how much money people can earn with disability. So when they start adding up your workers' comp benefits plus your SSDI benefits and SSI benefits, you may begin to not qualify for certain benefits, particularly SSI, because you're making too much money from workers' compensation and other benefits. That can significantly reduce the amount of income received by someone injured at work, because if you've been receiving workers' compensation right along and it's been a couple $1,000s a month and then SSDI kicks in, you might have a couple months where you're getting both, a couple $1,000s a month from workers' comp and then SSDI for a couple thousand. You're thinking you're in the money, but then workers' compensation takes a look and says, okay, you've got a couple months of overlap. You owe us back that overlap. You should not be making more as an injured individual than you would have made had you been working. So sometimes not knowing that could happen, depending on the state and the workers' compensation rules, could create a monetary problem, because all of a sudden a couple months later you're going to be asked to send workers' compensation check for several $1,000s, and you may or may not have it. So again, make sure that your tax advisor, make sure your attorney knows what the situation is so that they can help you plan for that transition and potential payback to workers' compensation once your SSDI starts to kick in. Both workers' comp and SSDI provide comprehensive coverage if you can't work. However, it's essential to understand that there's some drawbacks to that type of coverage. Normally, you're going to end up having to look at the benefits in total to determine what your eligibility is. They could impact your eligibility for other state and or federal benefits, depending on how high they reach. Having both workers' comp and SSDI can provide some peace of mind and financial security if you're injured or become ill and are unable to work. So what are the benefits of a workers' comp settlement tax-free status? One of the great benefits of workers' compensation settlement is its tax-free status, especially at the federal level. Although you might have already paid taxes on wages or salary associated with the injury, your settlement is exempt from taxation. The valuable benefit allows victims to keep more money when a court awards them damages because of an illness or injury, or when you settle out ahead of court. That means whatever you receive from your settlement is all yours, and can be used in any manner you choose, from covering medical bills to paying for a vacation. It's yours to keep in its entirety tax-free. In addition, having this special legal protection can give victims some additional peace of mind that they're getting the funds they need and deserve without worrying about the Internal Revenue Service taking a portion of it along the way. The only issue, as I had mentioned, that you may run into is, depending on the structure of that settlement, there may be elements of that settlement that are taxable, whether that's interest income, whether that's components that are deemed to be wages, whether that's components that kind of push you up over an SSDI limit, or SSDI payments that push you over a workers' compensation limit. As a result, you're encouraged to consult an accountant, tax professional to understand where taxes might impact the settlement before you agree to the settlement. Once you've agreed to the settlement, the bell has been rung and you can't unring the bell. So before you agree to the settlement, make sure you've got the input of your tax advisor, your attorney, and anybody else that is helping structure your post-injury life. So that may also be, you may have a workers' compensation attorney, you also may have a trust attorney to structure it so that the proceeds go into a trust, for instance. All those folks should be sitting at the table to help you structure that settlement. And the last thing, and you'll hear me say this routinely, talk to a tax advisor if you have questions about how your workers' compensation settlement will be taxed. Many people are unaware of how workers' compensation gets taxed, and it leaves you feeling vulnerable. You're just not sure. The money comes in. You're not sure if you're going to end up having to pay, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxes, whether it impacts your tax bracket. And in this particular case, certainly with respect to the federal government, that's generally not going to be taxable. It's beneficial to consult a tax advisor to ensure that all the taxes owed are taken care of, paid correctly. If there's taxes owed at the state level, a tax advisor can provide the appropriate advice for your situation, explain the conditions of your settlement in detail. They can also ensure you don't overlook any deductions you might be entitled to, like those medical deductions, that might save you significant amounts of money on your taxes, even though the settlement wasn't taxable. Taking time to get professional advice can be very worthwhile when dealing with such an important matter. If you're injured at work, you might be able to receive a workers' compensation settlement. Those settlements are typically not taxed at the federal level, as they are damages for personal injuries. There can be some advantages and disadvantages to having a taxable or tax-free status on your workers' compensation settlement, so it's essential to speak with an accountant or a financial advisor to determine what makes the most sense for your situation. Hopefully this was helpful, and if you're in a situation where you've gotten a workers' compensation settlement, I wish you the best of healing. I wish you the best of luck. It's a real challenge. I've had a number of friends go through it, and just wanted to make sure that you had the information you need to be able to think about how best to structure your life on the backside of recovery from this injury.